To hear the National Labor Relations Board tell it allowing NCAA student-athletes to unionize was a huge win, but for whom? To hear former Cornell cornerback Brandon Kerns put it, certainly not for college athletes. For unions, maybe, not them. Brandon, very good to have you. And why are you leery about this whole plan?
Neil, thanks for having me on the show. There are a number of reasons I'm a little bit leery of the current situation with potential athlete unionization. First, I don't feel like current supporters, or frankly even current athletes, fully understand the long-term ramifications of the NLRB's decision. And I think that it really threatens to damage the integrity that the sport currently enjoys, both from the athlete standpoint as well as the fans.
You know what you hear, Brandon, though, is that the NCAA and the schools involved make money hand over fist, and these kids, of course, when you're in that position, are the reason why. And so the NLRB comes to the kids and says, well, you should be getting something out of this. You join us, you will. What's wrong with that argument?
You know, I think that's fair, and I do think there are a number of reforms that need to be made within the NCAA with regard to athlete pay. But unionization just simply isn't the right path. You know, we all know the stats. 99% of all college athletes end up going pro in something other than athletics. And so we understand that the value of an education is what ultimately we're playing for. And what that represents, over $1 million in potential long-term additional earnings. And frankly, what I find to be a little bit even more interesting is that I worked with a number of Northwestern players and other college athletes on Wall Street post-Cornell who would attribute the value they've seen in their career not just to the fact that they're athletes, but more importantly from that high level of degree that they got from Northwestern or other prestigious schools.
Yeah, but those are very prestigious schools. You, of course, a prestigious graduate and a very smart student as well. You are more the exception than the rule. Then they might turn around and say, well, how can Brandon speak for me if I go to, let's say, a very good state school where I'm a rising athletic star? I'm hitching my wagon to potentially becoming a professional star, and then a union comes along and says, here's how we can make that happen. You say it's a devious pact.
I do. I mean, I think that, you know, as I mentioned before, there are other ways that athletes can monetize and commercialize their brand value outside of being employees of the university.
But it's hard, isn't it? It's very hard, because doesn't the school or the NCAA come back at you like a ton of bricks to say you're unfairly profiting? I forget the player's name who was, you know, showing up to sign some tchotchkes, and they came on.
Johnny Manziel.
That's exactly. I'm sorry. And they came down on him hard. And I didn't think what he was doing was that offensive, but explain.
I completely agree with you. I mean, if you think about it, what's the difference from a student athlete and a regular student? A student is allowed to start up an entrepreneurial endeavor while they're in school, and they're able to make money. Should athletes be able to do the same? What's the value of their signature? What's the value of their likeness on a video game or something similar?
Well, are you saying they can do that on their own, Brandon, without the help of a union?
They cannot currently. They cannot currently, but I do think that's some of the reform that should be made within the NCAA. Now, I think that's completely separate from unionization, which I think leads to long-term negative ramifications, such as strange team dynamics. I mean, are you going to be able to fire an athlete? What if an athlete goes on strike against a public school that currently, you know, isn't going to be within this legislation of unionization? It just doesn't make any sense. And I also fear for the other sports at schools outside of, say, football and basketball that are the big money makers. What happens to field hockey, lacrosse, and the like? And I just really think it hurts the integrity of college sports as a whole.
That's well put. Brandon Kerns, thank you very, very much. Good seeing you.
Good seeing you, Neil. Thanks for having me on.
He does make you think. Meanwhile, it's one thing.